No, because why are my braids so skinny? And I'm not. If they weren't in front of me, I bet you they would disappear with the green screen. Get distracted by the pizzas. So this girl says that this story has been told to her by her mom several times, and this happened when she was 3 years old. She says that one day her mom needed to go to the little store that was right across from their home, and being that she was calm and playing with some toys and that her older sibling was asleep, she decided to leave her there and just go straight to the store and come back. However, when her mom came back to the house, she found her crying and very, very pale. And because she was 3 and started talking already, she asked her what was wrong. Her mom says that in between her crying, she would point at the window and say, "Clown, clown." The mom explains to her that she got very scared because they lived on the second floor and the window didn't have like a balcony for somebody to be there. She attempted to console her and just calm her down because she did notice that her child was so scared. The next day, she needed to go to that little store again, but because of what happened, she decided to take both of her daughters with her. When she went to the store, obviously that lady that works there noticed that she had brought her kids with her and was like, "Oh, you just came with the kids really quickly." And her mom started to explain to the lady what had happened and why she's deciding to bring the kids with her now. Her mom says that when she told the lady what had happened, the lady got very serious and told her that she didn't want to tell her what happened in that land, but before they built those apartments, there was a really big tall tree, and that unfortunately somebody had taken their own life on that tree. The mom got really scared, and she even told her husband when he got home from work what had happened on that land and what the daughter claims to have seen on that window. After talking it through for a little bit, they decided that they were going to move away from that place because they believed that it could be haunted. Now that she's older, she says that she doesn't remember a clown, but she is very curious and wants to know what is the correlation between the clown and like the haunted land. Now she says that her parents never wanted to look into it at all. So she has to live with the fact that she will never know what happened or why she saw a clown. Can you imagine a freaking haunting and it's a clown? Like, it's not even just like a regular person. No, thank you.
Let's talk about scary rando nodding. If you're new here, hi. I used to talk about some pretty scary stuff, and today I'm going to be talking about my best friend's experience rando nodding. Absolutely crazy, and she just told me about it. If you don't know what rando nodding is, it is this app that you put on your phone called Randonaught, and you set an intention to take you somewhere within a certain distance. You can set the distance and the radius and stuff, and it'll take you somewhere to fill your intention. Many of you might be familiar when those teenagers found those 2 bodies in the suitcase and they posted it on social media. That's what they were using. Anyways, let's get into it. So my best friend was out randonauting when the sun was still barely up and set the intention to, I think creepy, something like that. They start driving and they soon realize that they are driving on a gravel road in the middle of nowhere. There are wheat fields all around them because we live in the Midwest, and it's dark by the time that they get out there. As my friend and everyone in the car was like, "This is bogus," a crow flies and almost hits the car. This bird got so close to the car that everyone started screaming. So my friend obviously parks the car because that was really hectic, looks at my friend M, who's in the passenger seat, and kind of looks past his head for a second and sees someone standing in the fields. Now, she tells me she doesn't know what it was and she wasn't sure what it was, so she never told me about it, but her instinct was to get out of there. So that's exactly what she did. She turned the car around and she looked one last time into the field to see if it would still be there, and it was gone. And at that point in time, she's telling me that, and she's like, "Well, I don't know what it was." And I said, if your body's telling you that you just need to go to be safe, it was probably something that was not supposed to be out there with you guys. The crazy thing is, too, that she never told anyone in the car what she saw, either because she didn't want to scare them. But that is one of my biggest fears living in the Midwest, is I'm going to be driving at night through a field or something, or on a road next to a field, and I'm going to look over and see someone or something in the field. I think she handled it perfectly, though, by not telling anyone, because if it was me in the car, I would have started freaking out. But that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
Want to get creeped out? Let's talk about the town that danced itself to death. It was July of 1518 in the heart of Strasbourg, a city ensnared by the Roman Empire. A woman named Frau stepped out onto the cobbled streets. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, betrayed no emotion when she started to move. Silently, she twisted, twirled, and shook. But her dance was not of her own making. It was as if some unseen hand guided her. Frau danced alone, her feet pounding the stones, her breath a desperate gasp. Days turned into nights, and still she danced. But she was no longer alone. The townspeople watched, their laughter turning into unease. Soon, others joined her dancing. At first 36, and then 400. Their bodies convulsed, their eyes wild, and their hearts raced to a rhythm that defied reason. Physicians blamed it on hot blood. They prescribed more dancing, as if the fever could be spun away. And so a stage was erected, a grand theater for this spectral masquerade. Professional dancers swirled, and a band played mournful tunes, but the music only fueled the frenzy. Dancers collapsed, their limbs trembling from exhaustion. Some met their end in strokes and heart attacks. September arrived, and the plague of movement persisted. The afflicted were whisked away to a mountaintop shrine, but the question lingered. Why did they dance? Disease and famine stalked the streets, and superstition took hold. Perhaps it was a stress-induced hysteria, or perhaps something darker. Strasbourg's Dance of Death remains etched in 16th century records, a haunting echo of bodies twirling, hearts racing, and the town caught in a fevered grip. Other theories have suggested that perhaps the dancers were part of a religious cult, or even that they accidentally ingested a toxic mold that grows on damp rye and produces spasms and hallucinations. It actually blows my mind that this was a real thing. Had any of you heard of this before? Because I hadn't. Anyways, that's it for this one. See you next time.
Let's talk about another haunted doll. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about some pretty scary stuff, and recently I was sitting down with one of my friends, and she told me legitimately the most terrifying ghost story I've ever heard about a haunted doll. So let's get into it. So here's the context of how the doll got to her and her family. Essentially, her neighbor was moving away and was like, hey, I can't take this doll with me. Can you guys keep her for me? I don't know why this neighbor would give them the doll. I don't know. And unfortunately, this doll wasn't like a Raggedy Ann doll. This was a large porcelain vintage doll. So my friend and her family agreed to keep the doll for their neighbor. And my friend specifically says that when they started having the doll in their home, there was just like some weird energy going on around the doll. And they specifically started to notice, and this gives me chills, that the doll's fingers started falling off. Like porcelain fingers would go missing. And they had no idea where the fingers were going. They were never able to find them. And just as a reminder, this wasn't a tiny porcelain doll where like the fingers could go missing if you like bumped it wrong. This was a pretty big porcelain doll from my understanding. Eventually it got to the point, I don't know how long into them having the doll where they decided to get rid of it, but it was essentially, this doll's really weird and it freaks us out and there's something wrong with it. So I'm pretty sure they donated it. So if you need to decide to not buy things from thrift stores, especially porcelain dolls, that was it. But it gets worse. So my friend was doing her laundry, and the way that their house is set up, the washer and dryer are in the basement where the doll used to be. She's just doing her thing when out of the corner of her eye, she sees this little thing run. And it was wearing the same color dress that the porcelain doll had, and it was about the same size as the porcelain doll. And my friend said after that experience, she refused to do anything in the basement or do her laundry in the basement for a long time. And that she still hates going down there. And I don't know what it is about seeing things out of the corner of your eye. Way scarier than I think seeing something at face value. But anyways, that's gonna do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
Spooky story time. A follower named Erica sent me the story and we're going to call it The Doll. Erica said that when she was about 11 years old, her and her family went to this yard sale and she bought this American Girl doll at that yard sale. She says that she remembers she fell in love with it, they bought it for her, and the old lady running that yard sale tells her, make sure you take good care of it. She says that about a month after she bought that doll, she started to get these very weird vibes from it. And she would have the urge to take it outside of her room every time she went to bed. One night, she forgot to take it out and she was asleep. She wakes up out of nowhere to turn around and she notices that the doll's head had moved. But because she was asleep, she kind of chalked it up and was like, you know what, I'm just tired, I'm seeing shit. The next day, she's cleaning her room and that doll is sitting on her windowsill. She says that she's kind of like standing right here looking at the doll, and out of nowhere, the doll literally just turns its head and looks at her. Obviously, she freaked out, goes and tells her dad. Her dad goes into the room and he sees this doll move her head as well, which I personally love because a lot of the times our parents just don't believe us. Thankfully, they got rid of that doll immediately. She obviously felt so much better after that. Erica says that her older sister also collected antique dolls and she hated them because of what had happened to her. She says they would just freak her out. Looking at them, especially their eyes, she was just like, One night, she decides to stay in the room with her sister. They're there chilling, and she hears someone say, hello. She looks at her sister, and she's like, huh? Her sister's facing the other way. She goes and she checks, and her sister is asleep. Erica's like, what the hell? She looks at the shelf where all of her sister's dolls are, and they are all just facing, looking at her. No. She's there looking at them, and out of nowhere, she hears, hello, again, but more of like a grunty hello. Oh. Erica says that she is now so traumatized with dolls. She hates them. And since then, she's experienced a lot of paranormal things. What do you guys think that this is about? Do you think it was the doll that brought in these weird energies? Do you think the house has something to do with it? Let me know in the comments. But thank you so much, Erica, for sharing this story with me. If y'all have any other stories that you'd like for me to read, go ahead and send them via DM or email, and I'd love to read them. And I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye!
She turned people into tamales and then sold them to the entire community to eat. Look, she made a lot of money, and people said that she had the best tamales on the market. In the dark alleys of Mexico City, the smell of freshly made tamales filled the air, drawing in hundreds of hungry citizens. The seller, a well-known tamale maker, Annabelle Gomez Lopez, sold her food outside the CDMX subway station. But beneath the steaming pot and wonderful aromas lie a sinister secret. Listen, brace yourself before you continue this video. Brace yourself. Annabelle Gomez Lopez was known for making the best tamales in Mexico City. Every day, customers lined up at her stand, excited to taste her delicious food. Her tamales had a special touch that made everyone feel happy. They were so tender, and a lot of people described them as being so sweet. One day, while Annabelle was preparing her food, she realized that she was low on cash and didn't have enough money to buy more meat for her tamales. And these tamales were how she made a living. This is when she noticed a little girl wandering alone in the street. The poor little girl was lost and looking for her parents. Annabelle immediately decided to help with a warm smile. Annabelle promised the little girl that she would help her find her parents. She took the girl in, lured her to her house, and offered to provide her food and shelter. However, Annabelle had a sinister plan. Instead of helping the little girl, she unalived her and used her body to make tamales, simply because she didn't have enough money to buy meat. This terrible act started a long and shocking pattern that lasted for the next few years. Everybody in Mexico City loves Annabelle's tamales. This began a long reign of terror, right? Like she lured many homeless women to her home with the same false promises. Hey, I'm gonna give you food and shelter. I'm gonna keep you safe. You can stay here until you find a place to go. Each time she took advantage of their trust, leading to the loss of more than 50 women. 50. She kept filling the bellies of hungry citizens with her delicious tamales. Then one random day came, and Annabelle's home filled with the strong aroma of gas. It turned out she had a gas leak in her home. What this leads to is actually just unspeakable. The gas that Annabelle's home was leaking seeped through her walls, causing worry amongst the neighbors. One neighbor noticed the awful smell and called for help quickly. When police arrived at Annabelle's home, they found something that nobody was expecting to find when they walked inside of her house that day. In the middle of the room, there was a young woman laying on the floor, but her flesh was gone. It wasn't there. The only visible thing was bones. This part of her was intact. Like, this was all intact. You could see that clear as day. Hair on the head, but everything else was just completely torn apart. Yeah, the young woman's bones were organized neatly next to her, like lined up in like a pattern. This was so alarming because Annabelle was known in the neighborhood, in all of Mexico City, for her tamales, made with tender meat and such a sweet taste. It was just like, oh my god, like, what do you put in here? What is your secret ingredient? Honey, I don't think you want to know. Annabelle was taken into custody and tried to plead like mentally insane. She said that a demon was in her head, told her to capture the first girl that she took off the street, the one who was lost looking for her parents. She said that a demon told her to take that girl home. She said that doing the first victim was hard, but she grew cold and just completely detached her emotions from the situation because she needed me. She had no money and she really needed to make those tamales. She had absolutely like no remorse. Like in one of her interrogations or something, she said something to the effect of, if it wasn't for that damn gas leak, I would have gotten away with it. Lady, my God, please. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison for homicide and then like damage to citizens' health, something like that. I think I'm gonna tell a ghost story next video. You guys like my bonnet? I've wore it before. I love the big ones. They're so cute. This thing is raggedy though. I need a new one. She's giving face. She's giving... Anyway, bye. See you guys in the next one.
It's honestly like the most messed up episode of Catfish you could ever watch. She got catfished into murdering her best friend. How does that even happen? It was the summer of 2019 in Chugiak, Alaska. Teenagers Denali Bramer and Cynthia Hoffman were best friends, having met originally at school. Cynthia was a really sweet, kind-hearted girl. She was a friend to anyone who needed her. She actually had a learning disability, which meant her mental age was younger than her physical age. But this really didn't stop her doing a lot of things that she enjoyed. She'd graduated from high school, she worked in restaurants, but the thing she absolutely loved was working with her dad. Her dad had this like handyman business and she really was like his right-hand woman. She was there by his side constantly, there if he needed anything from her. Cynthia and Denali would regularly hang out, but they couldn't have been more polar opposite. Denali wasn't at all the sweet, kind, caring girl that Cynthia was. Denali was spending more and more time online, developing this online relationship with a guy apparently called Tyler. Tyler very much seemed to be too good to be true, although Denali couldn't really see this. I don't know if you guys have ever had the situation where like one of your friends is talking to a guy online and you just know that they're not really who they are saying that they are. But Denali had these like rose-tinted glasses on. Tyler was claiming to be this millionaire from Kansas, and this is really reminding me of like those spam emails you can sometimes get where it's like a random person will email you and claim to be a long-lost relative and say, oh, I've got like £1 million, I just need a bank account to transfer it into. And if the millionaire part wasn't enough of a red flag, the conversations between the pair certainly were. This Tyler began suggesting the most sickening things to Denali, and she was going along with it. She was complying. They made plans to exploit a child and produce SA images, and they went ahead with this. Denali did do this. The victim was kept anonymous for obvious reasons, but Denali created images and sent them to Tyler via text. But the sickening plans didn't stop there. Tyler then requested photos from her showing her murdering somebody. He promised to give her $9 million in exchange for these sickening images. I just don't know who in their right mind would do anything like any of this. Denali enlisted 4 friends, 16-year-old Caden McIntosh, Caleb Leyland, and 2 others who were kept anonymous due to their age. Now, she told them about this sick money-making scheme, and it almost seemed like they were just kind of swept away by the money in this and just blindly agreed. She said that they would get a cut of the money once the plan had been carried out. On the 2nd of June that year, a poor, unsuspecting Cynthia got an invite to go hiking. Really happy to be invited for these plans, she made her way to Thunderbird Falls Creek. As soon as she showed up, things started unfolding like a horror film. The group callously bound her hands and feet and covered her mouth with duct tape. They then horrifically shot her in the back of the head before pushing her body into the river. Now, Denali took photo evidence of this, obviously, in order to get her monetary reward off this so-called Tyler. She thought this was going to be her ticket to becoming a millionaire, and she sent the images across, and the friends disposed of Cynthia's personal belongings. And the hours started to pass by, and Cynthia's parents got no word from her. She just seemingly vanished. The parents understandably started to fret, and they reached out to these so-called friends and said, like, have you seen Cynthia? And they just claimed to the parents that they dropped her off at a park. So after the parents had no luck finding her at said park, they got the police involved. It was an agonizing 2 days later that her body was discovered. It didn't take long for police to figure out who was responsible for this hideous crime. I mean, Denali and the other friends had been the last to see Cynthia, and they were the ones that had invited her there to the creek. And Denali had even apparently posted some cryptic Snapchat stories that the police wanted to take a look at. They seized her phone, and once they did this, obviously they found thousands of horrific messages between her and this Tyler. Except they were also able to discover something else about the interactions. I'm sure it will come as no surprise that Tyler wasn't actually Tyler at all. He wasn't a millionaire, and he wasn't even from Kansas. He was a catfish called Darren Shillmiller from Indiana who lived in his nan's house. Both Denali and Darren, Caleb and Caden were all arrested for their part in the sickening scheme. Both Denali and Darren were sentenced to 99 years in prison. Caleb got 30 years, and I actually couldn't find Caden's sentencing documents, but I imagine it would be similar.
I heard this story about a house that was completely infested with mimics. Now, it all started off with this family who lived in New York. And they had lived in this big home in a rural area. They, really, for the longest time, didn't have anything weird ever happen. Until one night, the wife and husband are, in the living room, and their kids are gone with a family friend. Well, the husband says, I'm going to, leave and I'll be back. I'm going to go to the store. Do you need anything? And his wife says, no, I'm good. I'll see you when you get back. So her husband goes out the front door, gets in his car, and drives off. Right after he pulls out of the driveway, all of a sudden she hears a noise upstairs. And when she walks upstairs, she sees her husband come out of the closet and just start walking down the hallway. And she's like, honey, wait, how did you get upstairs? You came back home? And he's like, yeah, I'm going back to the car. I'll talk to you later. And so he just goes downstairs and goes out the front door. So she calls her husband on the cell phone and was like, why'd you come back to the house? That was kind of weird. What were you doing upstairs? And he goes, what are you talking about? I'm far from home. I've been driving for a little while now. And she's confused, and she thinks he's just playing a prank on her. So fast forward to the wife and their two kids are sitting on the couch, and the wife and one of the kids are sitting on the couch, and one of the daughters comes downstairs, and they say, hey, what are you doing? You want to come watch a movie with us? And the daughter doesn't say anything. And they're like, hey, aren't you going to respond? What's wrong? And the daughter still doesn't say anything. She just keeps walking past them. And she goes into another room. So the sister follows and is says their name and is like, what are you doing? Well, all of a sudden, the sister comes back down the stairs again because she said, I heard you guys calling my name. And they're like, wait, no, you just walked past us into that room. How'd you get upstairs? And she's like, what are you talking about? I've been upstairs in the bathroom. And once again, they didn't know how, the wife didn't know what to think of this. So finally, the last straw was one night, her husband and her two kids, they had left to go do something, and she's up in her bedroom. She hears some rustling sound in her closet, and she's like, what is there something in my closet? She opens the door, and there's her husband, crouched down, holding his knees, sitting in the closet, kind of looking really weird, has this strange look on her face. And she's like, what are you doing in the closet? I thought you were with our daughters. And the man her husband just says, come in the closet with me. And she's like, what? And he's like, come in here, come in the closet. And she instantly knew that wasn't her husband, and she ran out the door and calls up her husband and is like, get here right now. And shortly after that, they end up moving.
This is literally the vacation of horror. Rebecca J. Middleton was a 17-year-old Canadian girl excited to go on a vacation with her best friend. They were going to Bermuda, and Bermuda is a British territory in the North Atlantic Ocean. An absolutely beautiful place to be. Her best friend Jasmine Means invited her to go, and they were supposed to be staying at Jasmine's father's house. He lived on the main island. Rebecca's parents felt comfortable with their decision to let her go. They trusted Jasmine, and they also trusted Jasmine's family. Rebecca just can't wait to bathe in the sun and make enjoyable memories with her best friend. Rebecca and Jasmine had landed in Bermuda Bermuda on June 19th of 1996, and in just a few days, it would be a very special day for Rebecca. It was her birthday. Even though she's far away from home, Jasmine's family want to make it as memorable as possible for her and make sure that she still has a good birthday. As the girls are having fun, they meet 3 boys from the UK who are also on vacation. The boys seem to be really nice. The names of these 3 boys are Russell, Ben, and Jonathan. As they're hanging out with these boys, they find out that one of the boys, Russell, actually has a birthday coming up too, and they invited the girls to come hang out and celebrate the occasion. He decided to celebrate at an old pub and seafood restaurant. However, this pub was actually a little bit different. You did not have to be 21 to be served, you could be 18. So Jasmine and Rebecca take advantage of this and have a few cocktails. Rebecca, though, was only 17, so she could not be served. I'm guessing one of the boys had bought her, a drink. While the group is hanging out, one of the boys make a suggestion to go back to one of their friends' house to continue the party. Although they're having so much fun, the girls realize that they lost track of time. It was way later than they expected. They forgot to call Jasmine's father to pick them up. They call for a taxi and they go outside to wait, but no taxi ever shows up. They call the taxi service for the second time. They say that a taxi did come, but the driver didn't see the girls waiting outside, so he just left. They tell the girls that they'll send another taxi. They wait outside again, but again, the same outcome. Where's the taxi? It's dark outside, the girls are alone, they feel very uncomfortable. Then out of nowhere, a familiar face appears. This makes the girls excited. This is actually a boy by the name Dean Lattimore. Both of the girls knew this boy. As the girls are chatting with Dean, a motorcycle pulls up out of nowhere with 2 men on it. 2 men that neither of the girls knew. The boys say to the girls like, hey, do you guys need a ride? They didn't want nothing to do with these men. They didn't know them. The boys are pretty persistent. They're like, you guys aren't getting a taxi. You might as well just get a ride from us. Like, no one's gonna be coming out here. And what are you girls doing out here alone in the middle of somewhere that you guys don't know anyway? And then they showed excessive interest in Rebecca. They were complimenting her on the necklace she was wearing. It was clear as day that they were very interested in her. They went ahead and accepted these rides. Jasmine actually gets on the motorcycle with Dean, and then Rebecca gets on the motorcycle with the 2 strange men. They take off, and Dean and Jasmine trail behind the motorcycle that Rebecca's on. And when they all reach a bridge, Dean decides that he knows a shortcut to get Jasmine home, so he takes it. Then Rebecca takes off into the night with these 2 unknown males. At around 2:30 in the morning, Jasmine is back home, but she's surprised to see that Rebecca's not there, and she waits some time, but Rebecca still does not show up. Jasmine goes to her father and she's like, I've lost Rebecca, and he's like, what do you mean? Like, how did you lose your friend? So they got into his vehicle and they drove around to look for her. They were driving around for a while, but who was also out driving that night was a group full of friends. The driver of this vehicle was a man by the name Rawlings. He was a club DJ, and he noticed something strange on the side of the road that he got out to look at. What he stumbled upon is he sees a young Caucasian female covered in red, and she's trying to speak to him, but she can't due to a wound that's on her throat. She can't get out what she's trying to say. Paramedics are immediately called to the scene, but by the time they get there, the girl is no longer alive, sadly. At some point, they actually end up calling Jasmine's father saying, hey, can you come down here to identify a girl in a body bag? I'm pretty sure he had reported Rebecca missing, and that's why they called him. When he first opens the body bag, at first, he cannot tell if it's her due to the injuries and all the red that she was covered in. He actually had to take a second look to be able to say that it was Rebecca Jane Middleton, the 17-year-old Canadian tourist who was here visiting with his daughter. Rick just immediately is overcome with emotion. He just doesn't know how he's going to tell Rebecca's family that their daughter is no longer alive, and this happened to her under his supervision. Rebecca was SA'd, and she had been stabbed over 30 times, which caused her passing. Police feel like if they figure out who she was on the motorcycle with, then that will be the key to solving this case. Dean Lattimore, the one who took Jasmine home safely, as he should. He said that he does actually know who the 2 men were who was supposed to be taking Rebecca home. Their names were Kirk Mundy and Justice Smith. Kirk was 21, Justice was 17. They get in contact with these boys and they are immediately taken in and charged. However, this part makes me very upset because here's why. Kirk actually told them that he had nothing to do with it and that Justice did it. Somehow this only got him 5 years because they believed it. I don't know how, but they did. I think that sometime after he had got out, they did like DNA or something. I'm not sure. All I know is that he got 5 years, and then sometime later they did DNA and found out that he was lying. He actually was involved, and his DNA was found on Rebecca, but where they are at, they could not retry the same case more than once. I'm not sure if it's like that everywhere, and for that he was able to walk free. He did 5 years. She was going on a vacation of a lifetime. I mean, she went to Bermuda, and to not only go to Bermuda, she was with her best friend, her bestie. Like, she just wanted to go and enjoy another place with one of her closest friends that she loved so much, and she never made it back home alive.
I'm about to tell y'all a story that I listened to about 3 days ago and it has not left my mind. And of course it happened in Mexico. So there was a truck driver who had a partner. You know, sometimes there's two people in a truck. They take turns while one is sleeping, one drives, the other one gets tired, the other one drives, and this one goes to sleep. Why did I overcomplicate that? Anyway, they were both on the road and the truck, something messed up to make them have to park on the side of the road. Mind you, this was in the middle of nowhere. They also realized that they had no signal on their phones and nobody in the radio was responding to them. So the guy who had been at the back sleeping volunteered to walk and see if there's anything up the hill, because at this point they were trying to go up a hill to go forward. He tells the guy that was driving to stay put in case anybody passed by or maybe a cop or anybody that can help them out. They both agreed. The guy went on his way and the driver stayed in the truck. So as the guy who stayed in the truck is waiting, he starts to feel something very eerie. Like, okay, fine, he's in the middle of nowhere, but like, why does he feel the sensation like he's being watched? It was also in that moment where he starts to hear almost like if something is scratching the passenger side of that truck. He wasn't thinking it was anything paranormal or like scary like that, but obviously he's like, well, what if it's an animal? What kind of animal is it? Should I be concerned? So what he did is he kind of went to the passenger seat, looked at the mirror because he figured he could see what was down there, and what he thinks he sees is an old lady. However, the weirdest thing is he thinks that he sees this old lady hunched over, hiding next to the passenger door, which would be crazy because if you know trucks, they're tall. So for her to be standing and hunched over would mean that she would have to be an extremely tall old lady. The only way that he can explain what happened next was that he almost went into some sort of a trance, because he says that he could swear that this lady was calling him by his name. He remembers closing his eyes because he didn't want to look at that lady. Something in him was telling him that this lady was up to no good. They were in the middle of nowhere, and why would there be an old lady out here? Not only that, but she knew his name. So as he has his eyes closed, swearing that this lady's calling his name and doesn't want to look at her, he starts to hear somebody honking. And he's like, oh my gosh, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's, you know, his partner. So he opens his eyes and no, he sees another truck driver passing by him like full speed, but honking the horn really, really fast and loud. However, that truck driver did not stop. He kept going. So obviously now he knows this truck driver was not helping them, but why were they honking? He's thinking maybe my partner got in contact with somebody, but why didn't they stop? So since they didn't stop, he again closed his eyes and just prayed and prayed and prayed, because obviously he still heard somebody calling his name. So he says that he has no idea how long he sat there with his eyes closed and just praying until somebody knocking on his window interrupted that. And thankfully it was his partner. And by this point, the driver got out of the truck, hugged his partner, and just started crying and crying and crying. After hugging his partner and he's still crying, he sees that his partner brought this guy that he knew that also fixes trucks, and he went and hugged him too and started crying, and they were both like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So he tells them, he's like, I swear there was an old lady. I think she was really tall because I saw her, she was calling my name. And they were both looking at each other like, I didn't see an old lady, like there's nobody there. Why don't you get in the other truck and let's just go? Like they were gonna go and fix this in the morning. I forgot to mention this was like at 3 or 4 in the morning. My bad, Pim. So their plan was to just drive ahead where there was like this restaurant that a lot of truck drivers stopped at until the daylight came back, and they would go back to the truck and fix it. They get to this restaurant and they recognized a lot of these truck drivers that were there, and one of the guy was like, what is wrong with you? Because at this point the guy, the driver, the one who saw that old lady, he was so pale and still scared out of his mind at what he had seen. However, he did not hold back. He told every truck driver that was at that restaurant exactly what he saw on the side of the road, and for some weird reason they all stayed very silent. The guy who had originally asked him what was wrong because he was pale told him, you know, someone just stopped and told us something weird. This guy tells them that about an hour ago a truck driver had stopped at that restaurant. He was also very pale and scared, and when he asked them what was wrong, the guy told them the following. I just got chills. This guy tells them that when he was in his truck driving downhill, because again the other truck was over here stuck going uphill, that he could have sworn that he saw an old lady, a very tall old lady with goat feet standing up on the side of a trailer. He explains that he was honking and honking because he was scared that the guy in the trailer was asleep and that this old lady with goat feet was going to attack him. And remember, the guy did have his eyes closed because he was scared and he was praying. So when he got really close to them, he hit the gas even though he was going downhill, and that's how he was trying to tell the guy, wake up, there was something next to the truck. However, he was too scared to stop, and that's why he ended up stopping at the restaurant that was down the road. And the reason why he stopped is because he couldn't drive anymore. He was terrified. He had to stop somewhere to like relax, to calm down. After about 30 minutes, the guy says that the guy finally calmed down and said, I have to leave, I don't even want to be in this area, I gotta go. And he went about his way. He could tell that every truck driver in that restaurant was very scared. They were all serious. Nobody was laughing. Nobody was taking it as a joke. Not only were a few of them there to witness the first guy saying that he saw the lady, but then the guy who saw the lady and was not asleep, was actually praying, comes in and like really confirms the story that the first guy said. He said that all the guys took it very seriously, and a lot of them agreed that they would not be stopping there even if they were tired, not even to rest. They would try to get as far away from that area as possible. That shit is so scary. Can you imagine? I cannot. Imagine if he didn't even have a partner though.
I was completely traumatized when I watched this disturbing opening scene of Jeepers Creepers. But did you know that the inspiration for this scene came from a real true crime case? And it's one that will send chills down your spine. I mean, just imagine driving down a remote back road, just on a joyride with your partner when you drive past an abandoned school. When you look closer, there's a man carrying a bloody sheet and dropping it into a hole at this old school. You keep driving, but then a little ways down the road, you notice the same man in a blood-covered vehicle following you down the road, almost like he's trying to run you off of it. You later find out that this man is responsible for brutally murdering his wife, and now he's on the run. Jeepers Creepers is hands down one of the scariest movies to me, but I can't stop thinking about the real story that inspired it, so let's talk about it. Everyone who knew Dennis and Marilyn Depew and their 3 kids described them as a loving and happy family, but behind closed doors, Dennis lived a completely different life. Dennis was a 46-year-old property assessor, and he was married to Marilyn, a 48-year-old high school guidance counselor. They had 3 kids together and lived in the small town of Coldwater, Michigan. They were married for 18 years by the time 1989 rolled around, and as the years went on, tensions grew. Marilyn said that Dennis was really controlling, and he became more and more withdrawn. She would secretly tell her friends that she was just really unhappy and wanted a divorce. So in December of 1989, she finally filed for one. Marilyn told her attorney that Dennis was trying to ruin her life, and he wouldn't let her make any of her own decisions. Dennis really didn't want to separate, and he felt like Marilyn was turning their kids against him. But once the divorce was finalized, things started to escalate. Dennis was granted bi-weekly visitations with his kids, but they really didn't want to spend any time with him. During this time, Marilyn was nice enough to grant him access to their guest house for him to use as an office, but really Dennis used it as a way to further control his family. Dennis became more and more aggressive to the point that Marilyn feared for her and her kids' lives. So she changed all the locks on the doors, hoping that it would keep him out, but it didn't. He would still find ways to get inside. This brings us to Easter Sunday 1990. It was Dennis's year for holidays, so he went over to the house to pick up the kids, but none of them wanted to go with him. Marilyn tried talking to him, but at this point he became so angry with her and started yelling at her. The kids watched as he pushed her down the stairs, and once she was at the bottom, he began beating her to the point of seriously injuring her. They begged for him to stop, but he wouldn't, so their oldest daughter ran to the neighbor's house to call the police. Dennis then told his other 2 kids that he was going to take Marilyn to the hospital, so he put her in his van and drove off. But they never made it to any hospital, and not long after this, the 2 vanished. A massive search began, but no one knew where to start, and this is where the story takes a really dark, disturbing turn. As this was all unfolding, an older couple decided they wanted to go for a joyride and spend this nice Easter Sunday out on the open road. They slowly drove down Snow Perry Road near Coldwater, and back then this was a really remote road that no one was ever on. As they were driving, a van with a license plate number starting with GZ sped past them. It scared them with how fast he was going, but they didn't really think much of it. That is until a few minutes later. This is when they drove past an abandoned school, and when they looked closer, they saw the van that sped past them parked there. Then, to their horror, they saw the driver of this van, which was a tall man wearing a white hat carrying a bloody sheet. He was trying to dispose of it, thinking no one was around to watch. The couple quickly drove away because they had such a bad feeling about what they just saw. But just a few minutes later, they looked up into the rearview mirror and saw the same van driven by the creepy man right behind them. The van tailgated them for several miles as if trying to run them off the road until the couple pulled over. This is when they noticed that the van had pulled over at a remote rest stop, and wanting to know what was going on, the couple turned around and drove closer. There there they saw the man changing the license plate on the van. But even more disturbing is that the entire passenger side of the van and even the inside was covered in blood. The couple wanted to call the police right then and there, but they wanted more information, so they decided to go back to the abandoned school to look around. This is when they found the bloody sheet that the man was carrying sticking out of a hole, and this is when they finally called the police. They told them everything, and this is when they were informed that the man they saw was Dennis Depew, and he was wanted for seriously injuring and possibly even killing his wife. When police arrived at the school, they found tire tracks that matched Dennis's van. They also determined that the blood found on the sheet belonged to Marilyn, and there was so much blood and other evidence that it seemed clear that she was dead at this point, and that Dennis had killed her. This suspicion was sadly confirmed the next day when Marilyn's body was found on a desolate road not far from the school. Along with being severely beaten, she'd also been shot once in the back of the head. Over the next few days, Dennis would send a series of 17 letters to his friends and family, just like this one, where he tried to justify Marilyn's death. They were postmarked all over the place, which made it difficult to locate him. After this, Dennis vanished, and no one knew what really happened to him. That is, until 1 year later. It's now March of 1991 in Dallas, Texas. A woman named Mary got off work and went back to her house where she was surprised to see her boyfriend's van in the driveway. She was dating a man named Hank Queen, and usually Hank would park his van in the garage, so this was weird to her. When she went into her house, Hank told her that his mom was really sick and he needed to make an emergency trip back to his hometown, so he asked her to hurry up and go in the kitchen to make him some food for the road. Mary felt like something really weird was going on, but she did as he asked and went to make him some food. As she did this, he packed up all of his personal belongings, and he kept telling her to either remake his food or add stuff to it. He finally said goodbye and took off. Later that night, Mary was watching TV when a new segment on Unsolved Mysteries came on, and she was shocked to see Hank's picture plastered on the screen, except it wasn't Hank. In all reality, it was Dennis, who gave her a completely fake name, and there she learned that he was wanted for murdering his ex-wife in Michigan. She believes that he was acting so weird earlier because he saw his own broadcast on TV, and he kept her in the kitchen so she wouldn't see it too. What's crazy is that she had this gut feeling in the past, well before she found all of this out, that Dennis was off, and she even hired a PI to look into him, but they found nothing under the name Hank Queen. So all of this was reported to police, and Mary gave them his new Texas license plate number. He was quickly tracked down in Louisiana, and within 4 hours, he would be dead. State troopers tried pulling him over, but he led them on a 15-mile high-speed chase, which ended in police shooting out his back tires. At 4 a.m., and after shooting at police, he turned the gun on himself and ended his own life. It's crazy to me that he was able to evade police for an entire year, essentially just starting a new life. And this case definitely left a horrifying mark, because it eventually inspired the opening scene of Jeepers Creepers. This movie follows a brother and sister who happen to encounter a monster while on a road trip home from college. They accidentally drive by this creature throwing what appears to be a body wrapped in a bloody sheet down a pipe outside of an abandoned church. They then discover a horrifying scene after going down the pipe to investigate, and then they are almost run off the road by said creature as they try to leave the scene. This is one of the first horror movies I ever watched as a kid, and the ending scene is still burned into my brain, which, if you know, you know. But the fact that this is based off of a real encounter is absolutely terrifying, and now you'll never catch me taking a back road like this.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Y'all seem to really like the craziest storytime videos that I have, so I have another one for you. This is a story time about when I made my ex come ghost hunting in a graveyard with me. And yes, we were in one of the most haunted graveyards in America, apparently, on the East Coast. If this video actually gets big, then I'll go and find the videos from my old camera and my Snapchat and the photos and everything from the actual ghost hunting session in the graveyard, and I'll share those with you if you want to see all of that. But yeah, a few years ago, I had my ex come and go ghost hunting with me. So basically we had to wait until the graveyard closed, and they closed at 8. So we went during the day and walked around and everything like that, because it's literally like a whole park. Like, you could ride through, they have events and stuff there, but it's like a massive graveyard too. So we go through the graveyard and everything during the day, and we're looking around and everything, and then we went to like the street next to it that had like these bars and food spots and everything. So we went over there, grabbed some food, snacks, stuff like that. We already had our little bag ready with the cameras and all that and stuff that we needed, you know. But we waited until the sun started going down. Then it was a little after 8. We had to go and sneak into the graveyard because we couldn't go through the front gate. So we climbed up the fucking back wall and through the trees, and we get into the graveyard, and we look to the right, and it's like up at the main house. It looks like it's some people that's like in the parking area talking to each other, whatever. So we like, oh shit, I don't want to get seen. Let's get out the way, right? So it's like this massive field that we got to get across, but the sun is still going down. So it's like we kind of got the shadow of the trees to hide it. So I'll be running across. So we're ducked down, we're running. I have my eyes looking down at my feet, right? I look up. There's a man in front of me, right? And this man, it was a black man, middle-aged man. He looked like he was in his like later 40s or something. He had on one of those like trucker type hats with the like the net type of shit in the back, and then he had on a red flannel shirt and some blue jeans, and he had a rake, and he was raking the leaves. And I looked up, and he was right there, and I darted off to the other side, right? I run this way. My ex runs behind me. We get over behind this little wall, right? We get behind this wall. He's like, what the fuck are you running from? I'm like, you didn't see that man standing right there? Like, we walked right up on the groundskeeper, nigga. He's gonna call the fucking security. What the hell? We're sitting behind this wall 30, 45 minutes. He's like, I don't think nobody's right there. I'm like, I don't know. He's like, I don't think nobody's right there. I'm gonna go check. He goes to check. He comes back. He's like, I don't even see nobody. I don't see nobody walking. I don't see nobody up there. I don't see nobody raking no leaves or nothing. And then I sat there for a second. I was like, wait. He was raking, but he didn't say nothing. Like, we was right next to him. He didn't say, hey. He didn't. I didn't even hear the of the raking, and I was like, let me just not. Like, are you trying to tell me that's a ghost? Let's not, right? Because that nigga was, I saw that with my physical eyes, okay? So that was the first thing. And we're walking around in this graveyard and everything, and we got our flashlight, and we got our little radio, our ham radio, and we're flipping through the stations and everything, and we're kind of using that as our spirit box. We went in there with white sage and holy salt from a church in our pocket, so we actually did not have a negative experience when we went in there, because I went in there another time with somebody else and it was fucking terrifying. So this first time we went in there was actually a very peaceful experience, and we're walking around and we're using this thing. So like little stuff starts to happen like this. We're walking past a certain plot or whatever, and I feel this pulling from the right of me, but I didn't look. I didn't look. Usually I look towards, but I didn't look where I was being pulled towards, and then I started feeling this aching in my chest, and then I felt the aching go through my breast and down into my ribs and my lungs, and everything right here was hurting to the point where I literally stopped, and I was standing there like, what the fuck? Like, it's hard for me to breathe. While I'm standing there, I look down, and there's a plaque in front of the burial plot that I'm in front of, and it was a black women's breast cancer burial plot. We're walking down one of the main roads in the graveyard, and while we're talking and we're walking, my thought process is getting cut off, and it's like this kind of visual of a little girl skipping in a circle around me while I'm walking, and she's like, hi, I'm Mary. Hi, I'm Mary. Hi, I'm Mary, right? So it got to the point where I just looked at him, and I was like, somebody wants to say, hi, I'm Mary, right? And he's like, Mary? I'm like, yeah, just keep saying, hi, I'm Mary. We keep walking down the road a little bit, and one of the only headstones that was actually literally like 3 inches off of the road, facing the road, usually they're like in plots and a little farther back behind the bushes, it was a gravestone for a child named Mary. I don't remember the exact years I was on there, but it was a short amount of years. It was a little child named Mary whose gravestone we ended up walking past after this. We took a number of pictures in the graveyard where there were like orbs everywhere, like snow. It was orbs everywhere, okay? Hella pictures of that. There's even a picture where I stopped on the side and I was like fixing something with my camera, and you can literally see like a whole face right here, like in the picture. There's a whole ass face, to the point where we had to go back and look and see like, was I standing next to a statue or anything like that? No, there was a whole ass face sitting right here while I was, and the crazy thing is, while I was standing there, I felt it right there, and then I decided to turn and walk in the opposite direction than the direction that I felt it in, and the picture just validated it. The whole time we were walking around in the graveyard, we just thought security was following us. We thought security was following us, but kept turning off their flashlights. And you look around the park, you'll see that you can see the entire park from almost every angle. Like, it's a big ass park. You could see the entire park. So if there were to be security guards in there, they would have been seen us. If there were securities in there, we would have been saw them. Okay, we had flashlights on, but it's just like, it just always seemed like somebody was like 15 steps behind us doing a small jog, like, I'm gonna catch them, I'm gonna catch these fucking kids, they think they slick. That's how we felt the whole time. We were in there for like 2 or 3 hours, and the whole time we felt like somebody was like trying to catch us. I remember we were laying down on the ground and we were taking some pictures down the hill, and caught a picture of this big, black, massive, beastly looking fucking thing, and then the camera died. right after we took the picture. So I started recording on my Snapchat, and I'm like, yo, what the fuck? The camera died. And then we looked down, and we were like sitting on top of somebody's grave. So we stood up, and we like, oh my God, I apologize. Swear to God, like, nah, I'm sorry, we already doing too much being in here. But after that, I remember, like, we were walking around, some little stuff happened with the ham radio. Like, we were standing under this tree, and he said, do you know where we're standing right now? Do you know where we are? And then it said branch, and then we was like, did you hear that? And then it was like tree, and then it was like, okay, now, like, okay, now it's saying something for real. And then it was like, like a little fucking giggle. And you know, when you switch it through the station, just edge, like, we're like, okay, all right, shit is happening, right? Later on in the night, we go to the center. We go to the center of the graveyard where there's a little obelisk in the center of the graveyard. And it's like some grass around it up on this platform and shit. I went and I'm sitting on this platform, and I felt comfortable. Like, I felt a feeling like the grass was just so comfortable. Like, I could have literally laid down and slept there for the rest of the night comfortably, like fine. But I was like, actually, it might not be a good thing that something's trying to make me so fucking comfortable right now. Let me get up. Because I really didn't want to leave. Like, I was very blissful right there. I really did not want to go anywhere. But this motherfucking man, because there's also, when we looked online about it, there is, in the October seasons, there's a roll call that happens out there. One of the sergeants or generals who passed away and is buried out there, he does a roll call, and you hear him calling out names of soldiers. That's the story, right? This is not the time of year where it was supposed to be happening either. So we're standing there in the middle by the obelisk, and he's like, this man stands up and he says, soldiers, attention! And I looked at him and I said, oh, why would you do that? And I felt this tingling from the back of my head, and I said, they coming. And I turned around and I clicked, orbs coming up the walkway. Turn around, felt it this way, click, orbs coming up the walkway. Turn around, felt it this way, click, orbs coming up the walkway. He ended up taking pictures of me sitting in front of the obelisk, and there were orbs around me like fucking snow on a clear night. Every fucking where. That was quite an experience that night. We experienced a lot of different things that night, but we ended up having to go out the same way we came in. But we were in there for a few hours, and a lot happened. And when I went back in there with somebody else, I saw a little fucking dark demon thing running and hiding behind bushes, and me and this nigga was like, hold on. This is not the same energy. We need to get the fuck up out of here. So yeah, that's when I went ghost hunting in the cemetery. Not recommended. Actually against the law, probably. Don't tell them it was me. It wasn't me. I didn't do that, actually. This is for entertainment purposes only. TikTok.
Imagine you're hanging out with a group of friends in a setting kind of like this one. Everyone's sitting around the couch and someone says, let's play truth or dare. And you do. And it's all fun and games until someone says something that crosses the line. Because that person should not be in that room playing truth or dare with you. They should be in jail behind bars. Let's get into it. Today's story takes place in Lancashire. Is that how you say it? It's in England. 18-year-old Tiernan Darton lived there with his mother and his stepfather. He was the only child to those parents, so he got all the love and attention equally from both of them. His stepdad always loved him and treated him as his own. In his early teenage years, when he was around 13 years old, Tiernan began to struggle heavily with his mental health. His mind just wasn't really a nice place to be. And it affected him socially big time. He didn't want to go to school, didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to see anyone. He just didn't really want to do anything. And his parents noticed, and they tried to get him the help that he needed. Because they saw just how big of a toll this was taking on Tiernan, they took him to see a doctor. He was prescribed medication to help with his depression and his anxiety. He was seeing a therapist, and the decision was made that he would be homeschooled. Years passed, and by the time that he was 17 years old, he felt like he was behind socially because his friends that he did have were moving on with their lives, and Tiernan felt kind of stuck, which in turn only made his depression worse. He didn't have any hobbies. He didn't really leave the house much. He didn't have anything to distract him or get his mind off of things, didn't have anything that he enjoyed to do, really. And as time went on, his behavior only got worse, and he kind of became a troubled child. He was acting out all the time. He wouldn't follow any house rules. He would basically did whatever he wanted to do, and that wasn't gonna fly. So Tiernan moved out of the house that he lived in with his mother and his stepdad, and he moved in with his step-grandmother, so the stepdad's mom, which is the cutest lady I've ever seen in my whole entire life, 94-year-old Mary Gregory. And things were good. It seemed like Tiernan was enjoying living with Mary. Mary was nothing but an angel towards him. She treated him like an adult, considering that he was now 18 years old, but she really did make him feel safe and secure inside of her house. It seemed like the two of of them were getting along just fine. It seemed like an ideal situation for them to be in. But then tragedy struck. On May 28th of 2018, when Mary's house went up in flames, neighbors saw this, and of course they knew that Mary lived there. They were worried sick about this elderly woman being stuck inside her house. 911 was called immediately. Firefighters rushed to the scene, and when they entered the house, they found 94-year-old Mary unconscious under a table, and at that point, the entire house was filled with smoke. They took her out of there as fast as they could, and she was rushed immediately to the hospital. Mary Gregory passed away 4 days later. She was in a horrible state when she was rescued from her house, and despite doctors' best efforts, they were unable to save her. The cause of the fire was ruled as an accident, and the death of Mary affected her family heavily. Remember, this was Tiernan's stepdad's mom, so it was technically his step-grandma, but he looked at her like his own grandma, just the way that he looked as his stepdad as his own father. Tiernan and the mom and his stepdad and his family had a really well-blended family, and they were all really close, and they all grieved the loss of Mary together. Tiernan moved back into his mother's house, but his mental health remained awful, and it still only felt like he was declining. It felt like it was getting worse day by day. So he continued seeing a therapist, and with his therapist, Tiernan opened up. That's what you're kind of supposed to do with a therapist. He talked about his family, he talked about his friends, and he talked about one friend specifically. He told his therapist that this one friend could send him to prison because of what he knows. And the therapist says, tell me a little bit more about that. And Tiernan does. He tells his therapist about this get-together that he was at a year ago, only weeks after Mary passed. He said he was hanging out with his friends and they were playing Truth or Dare. It was Tiernan's turn to play and he picked Truth. And the question was, what is your biggest, darkest secret? And Tiernan looked at his friends and he said that his biggest, darkest secret was that he had ended someone's life. And his friends' reactions were probably what you would imagine. They were taken aback for a second, but then they started laughing and they were like, yeah, right, absolutely not. Tiernan said that he had to tell them the entire story to get them to believe him, but they didn't. They still thought that it was a joke. And I guess they were so convinced that it was a joke that they never said anything to anyone. And by the way, if you're a young person watching my videos, if a friend makes a joke to that degree to you, go tell an adult, go tell someone, and then probably get away from that person. So again, he's sitting in this room with his therapist. He's telling the therapist about this game of Truth or Dare and what his truth was, and the therapist says to him, I'm not really sure I understand what you're saying, but I think that you're telling me that you someone. And Tiernan just says yes. The following week, he goes back for a different session and he brings along his stepdad to listen this time. And when Tiernan is in the room with his therapist and his stepfather, he makes his full confession. He describes the night that Mary passed away and he says that the cause of the fire was not an accident. He tells them that fire was caused intentionally by his own self and tells them that that night he, quote, set fire to the curtains with a lighter, end quote. He explains that the two of them had not been getting along at all for the same reasons that caused him to move out of his mom's house in the first place, because he was disrespectful. He didn't like to follow rules. He wasn't going to care about a curfew. He wanted to treat Mary's house like it was his own house. He would have get-togethers, little parties. He would invite random people over. He was just, it sounds like an absolute menace. And Mary was 94 years old, keep in mind. She would try to enforce her rules on Tiernan, but he didn't care. All he cared about was doing what he wanted to do. He didn't care if it inconvenienced other people. He wanted to do what he wanted to do, and he didn't care if people did not agree with him. So it turns out that their living situation was not smooth sailing at all. There was a lot of tension between them, and the tension was at its worst the night of the fire. That day, Mary and Tiernan argued, and Tiernan had enough. He decided that he did not want Mary around anymore, and he was going to do what he could to get rid of her. The night of May 28th, 2018, Tiernan let himself inside of Mary's house while she was sound asleep in her bedroom, and everything he did next was to ensure that when the fire started, Mary would not be able to escape the house. Tiernan disconnected the phone lines, he took apart the smoke alarms, and he put that table blocking the door of the house so that if Mary did make it to the front door, she still wouldn't be able to get outside because the table would be in the way. And then he set the curtains on fire, he watched them go up in flames, and then he left. He walked out, locking the door behind him. He walked back to his mother's house and he fell asleep. And again, this lady was 94 years old. Tiernan was right. She was not able to move the table out of the way to leave the house. This was the second time now that Tiernan was confessing to ending the life of his step-grandmother. The first time he wasn't believed. This time he told his therapist and his step-grandma's son, his stepfather. And I cannot imagine what this stepdad was thinking, sitting in this room, listening to the person that he loved as a son, listening to his confession and the details of everything he did to take Mary's life. I cannot imagine what he was thinking or feeling, but what a sickening thought that he's not only finding out that Tiernan is capable of doing something as horrible as that, but he's also finding out that his victim was his mother. And why Tiernan felt the need to confess straight to his face, we will never know. Tiernan was arrested and officers headed to his house to search his bedroom bedroom and they found a lot. Officers discovered a series of disturbing Google searches when they looked through his electronic devices. In June of the previous year, Tiernan had searched, quote, "Filled with despair, I'm a murderer, I'm a monster, and I'm going to hell. I want to cause evil and urge to again." They also found a list of names that he had written down. So a Google search that read urge to again, I want to cause evil, and then a list of names. It looked like a hit list. In August of 2018, they found another Google search that said, quote, "feeling guilty for putting a loved one out of their misery," end quote. Investigators also found a handwritten floor plan of Mary's house. The sketches were marked with eerie notes, including phrases such as good hiding place and quick exit, and references for needing, quote, "a good alibi." With that, Tiernan was arrested and charged with the murder of Mary Gregory. His trial began in November of 2021. In court, Tiernan said, "Hey guys, never mind what I said. This is all a big misunderstanding. I didn't mean what I said." He claimed that he had false memories because his struggles with mental health. And the prosecution said, "Okay, yeah, too little too late. We have all the evidence that we need to prove that you were responsible for this." The jury also heard about his fascination with death. They heard about his Google searches and the fact that he had previously looked up different methods of ending people's lives. And after a thorough investigation and disturbing evidence showing premeditation, the jury found him guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 15 years. This is kind of a long quote, but I want to read what the judge said when they sentenced him. It reads, quote, "has been on your mind for some time. On your own evidence, you were fascinated by serial killers and their crimes. You had dark thoughts. Internet searches which you made before and after you Mrs. Gregory paint a worrying picture. Your opportunity to act on your dark thoughts came when your stepfather was away. In the early hours of May 28th, 2018, you went to Mrs. Gregory's home and deliberately started a fire in one of the bedrooms. It is hard to imagine the horror Miss Gregory must have felt when she realized her house was on fire and was filling with smoke. Neighbors heard her screams. Despite her frailty, she tried to get out, but she had been trapped. The fire service found her near to the conservatory doors, where you had blocked her to exit. Her final days were spent in a hospital. Quite understandably, her condition in those days continues to haunt those who love her. The manner of her death was particularly cruel," end quote. Yeah, sick guy, sick thought that if he didn't literally snitch on himself, he would have gotten away with this. It's unbelievable. That is all I have for today's story. Thank you guys for spending time with me today and for listening to today's story. I hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.